Hey guys, um, this is going to be a very difficult video. Um, Forgive me if I get some things wrong or fumble through this. I been mulling this over for weeks, thinking about how to do this because I didn't want to just share a post. I wanted to do something more than just share a post. So, what I've decided to do is go with sharing some information. And again, forgive me if I mess this up a little or flub it up a little, but I feel that this is something that needs to be said. Everybody needs to know. I'm not sure, such a long time ago that I was in school, I'm not sure I ever learned about this, not that I can remember. And if I didn't, I should have. Most of you know about the 215 sets of remains that were located around one of the residential schools. And it's absolutely heartbreaking. But I wanted to go on a bit of a fact-finding mission. I've done a little bit of research myself, and that's what I'm going to share here with you today, just to give you more of an idea of the scope of the residential school system, because it is far wider than I was even aware of. Before the residential school system, they started mission schools. And I know that they've talked about, I looked up when were the residential schools. It was about 1831 to 1996 when the last one closed. That's 165 years. But pre-residential schools, they did what they called mission schools. This goes back all the way to 1620. I didn't find a lot of information on the mission schools. It's my understanding that they weren't quite as bad as residential schools. I'm not sure what went on. Again, I've been trying to research and find this out. But still, I mean, you're talking in total, I think it's 376 years. I have such a hard time fathoming that. And it was all about trying to assimilate Aboriginal people into the Euro-Canadian culture. They had proposed that separating Indigenous children from their families was the best way to assimilate them. They came across something, it was a particular act, it was called the Gradual Civilization Act, where it said that male status Aboriginal peoples and Métis over the age of 21 to read, write, and speak either French or English, and to choose a government-approved surname. Surname. It would award 50 acres of land to any, quote, sufficiently advanced Indigenous males, and in return removes any tribal affiliation or treaty rights. Now, the interesting thing about that is when I found another source for that, it said that they had to be debt-free, educated, and a good person morally, and that they could apply for that land. So, two very different sources of information. Things are a little bit different there. Take from that what you will. But in essence, eventually, the federal government took over their land and their education. The Indian Act of 1876, the goal of that was to eradicate First Nation culture in favor of assimilation. In 1883, residential schools were actually authorized and designed to isolate the children from their families and to cut all ties to their culture. I believe in total, if the numbers are correct, there were around 130 residential schools in total. And schools would get an allowance per student, which often led to overcrowding and, of course, illness in these schools. The maximum number of schools that were operating at one point time were more than 80. And there was also what is called the 60s scoop children, who were literally scooped from their homes and adopted into predominantly non-Indigenous families, sometimes not even within Canada. So the way I figure it, the mission schools operated for about 211 years. Again, from what I understand, I don't know what went on in there. It's my understanding that it wasn't nearly as horrific as the residential schools became. The other interesting thing that I found out, or that I didn't know this either, was Canada is not the only country to have had residential schools. The US had them as well. I just took it upon myself to try to educate myself more about it. I forgot to mention when the schools would get overpopulated. There was a time when, and it was quite a while ago, where there were starting to be investigations where people were saying, this isn't helpful, this is harmful, but it was decades ago, decades, and still it continued. It was found at one point that in these schools, the Indigenous children were dying at an alarming rate of at least 25%. And that climbed to 69% after the children left the schools. Now, this cannot be forgotten. This cannot be allowed to stand. It is, people need to recognize this, acknowledge this. I have had experiences. I have some very dear Aboriginal friends. And this, I had to say to one of them, just because I felt like I need to say it out loud, like, not everyone is like this, not everyone wants this, not everyone wanted this. It's wrong. I've been seeing a lot of the stories online, survivors sharing their stories, and it's absolutely, there are no words. There are just no words. But I struggled with whether or not to do this video, how to approach it, but I knew very early on I had to do something, say something, put something out there, because I didn't want to just put up some post of support, which, is great if people do that to get it out there and recognize it. I am not condemning that in any way, shape, or form, but I felt like I needed to do more. I encourage you to look into it yourself. I've only shared a fraction of the information. And I know I've had experiences in the past where I didn't understand. Nothing bad, but there had been moments where I had some interactions in a service environment from Aboriginal people, and whether it be their business, and I felt I could feel there was a bit of a guard, a caution, a distance, and I never understood why. I never understood why, but when I look at this and as I research this as an adult, it's no wonder. Is it any wonder the feelings, I mean the trauma? It is a trauma of generations, and the trauma continues because your trauma affects you, and if you haven't dealt with and healed from your own trauma, you do pass it on to your children in various ways. This is something beyond, I mean, even calling this a trauma, there's no words to properly explain it. There just isn't. But I hope this is informative, that it makes you open your eyes to what goes on, how they were so poorly, I mean, they were treated less than human. And nobody had any right to do that to them. Nobody. And if you feel that this was helpful, please share this. I hope it encourages you to really look at it and try to understand and, put yourself in their shoes a little bit, see where they're coming from, because it's no wonder. When you think about all the things, it's no wonder. So I do encourage you to share this video, and I hope you look into this more on your own and really see it. It needs to be seen. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.